If you're like me, you probably grabbed totally matte hanako-kun on a whim at your local bookstore after seeing the beautiful cover by AidaIro. As a fellow artist, it was inevitable that I'd want to study from their art. So in this video, I'll break down what I've learned about their art style, some tips to replicate it, and then show how I implemented what I learned into my own art style. I'll study from these three drawings primarily, but I did look through their art book and manga covers as well. Before you start any art study, I think it's important to hone in on what you want to focus on. You probably have a specific part of the artist's style that you really like and would like to replicate. So in my case, this would be the way they draw eyes, the face proportions, and rendering. So in my study, I'll primarily focus on these aspects on top of the art style as a whole. First, let's start the proportions of the face. Just note that, of course, not all of these proportions are exact every time, but it does give a general baseline for you to use. Okay, for the size of the face, we can divide it roughly into 3 sections, with each section seeming to be roughly the size of their eyes and eyebrows combined. Or, in other words, something like 1.5 times the size of the eyes. The eyes themselves are quite large, probably bigger than you think they are, so you want to make sure to draw them quite big. The space between the eyes and the edges of the face and ear is actually quite small, and the space between the eyes themselves are roughly the length of half an eye. The length of the ears are also about 1.5 to 2 times the length of the eyes. These proportions seem to mainly be for teens and young adults. When it comes to adults, the face is a little bit longer, with the eyes being a little bit smaller, and for kids, the bottom part of the face is squished down. Lastly, they don't really draw much for a nose, instead using some stubs to kind of represent the nose. When it comes to line art, I don't believe they use any special brush. I think it's just the regular hard round brush with tapered ends. The line art is what I'd call slightly messy. Overall, it's rather clean, but if a line is wobbly here and there, they don't fix it. I think this works in their favor for their quick turnaround as a mangaka, so it makes sense. Like a lot of other artists, they add a thicker line art around the characters as a whole, and if this is a black and white drawing like in the actual manga pages, then these outlines can be really thick. They also use thicker line art for areas of focus like the shape of the face and oftentimes the hands. Smaller details are generally done with a smaller brush like clothing folds or some sort of details. Also, even in colored illustrations, areas of dark shadows are often colored in black from the line art. In the black and white style, they use hatching to blend out the lighting, and from what I could tell, they don't seem to really use screen tones. The line art itself seems to just be black or extremely dark purple, brown, or red to the point that it really just kind of looks like black, it's hardly noticeable. But that doesn't mean that the line art doesn't have any color, as the line art does include a little bit of color. But instead of coloring the line art itself, they simply add an extra layer and draw some lines over the original line art where they want to add color. This seems to primarily be done with lines that touch the skin, like the ears, face, or hands. Oftentimes, this line art is just a really saturated darker red. There's an exception made for the nose, which is often just recolored directly rather than over. When it comes to the eyes, the top part of the eyes are quite thick, with the bottom parts being very thin. Sometimes the bottom parts of the eyes aren't even fully drawn in, instead using broken up lines. Like lots of anime styled eyes, they add kind of like a sharpened curve to the top edge of the eye, but they make this rather thick and rounded. So combine that with the thick top of the eye, I think this is really what helps their eyes really stand out in their pieces. This thickness is also often colored in with the same color of the line art used for the skin. Not fully colored in, it is a little bit scratchy, but it is overlaid with a different color. The pupils of the eyes are rather wobbly. Most of the time, the pupils are not a clean circle or oval, and rather are wobbly or a circle, but done with straight lines rather than a smooth curve. Rendering is definitely what gave me the most trouble, as I'm really not that good at color theory, while they clearly are masters at it. So I'll do my best to share what I figured out, but just know that it's rather hard to replicate if you don't understand lighting and color theory very well. For rendering, they seem to mainly rely on value to create separation rather than the typical use of saturation, as the entire piece is pretty saturated. The face is often what has the most attraction in the coloring, using rather saturated colors, especially if they want to draw attention to the eyes. Even though they use a wide range of colors in just one area, I think it can be broken down into the 3 color theory as well as use of complementary colors. I won't go into great depth about the 3 color theory, but basically it requires a base color, a lighter color within the same hue range for the highlight, and a darker color within the same hue range for the shadows. This is done instead of using overlay layers like multiply or darken. On top of that, they include a saturated red along the bottom, edge, and top part of the eye, with the bottom part being roughly blended out to give some life to the cheeks. It's important to note that this is more or less the only place they seem to really blend their colors. Everywhere else, they just use hatching if they want to mimic blending. They then add some complementary colors in certain locations that give more color to the overall piece. I've seen some say they don't use blend modes at all, but honestly, I disagree. From what I can tell, they do use blend modes, but they just save it for the very end as a finishing touch. I'm pretty sure they don't seem to really use blending modes when it comes to highlights or lighting, but I do think that they probably include a single layer of either multiply or darken to give it some extra shadows. When it comes to the rendering specifically for the eye pupils themselves, I think they also follow the 3-color theory where you have a base color, the bottom part is a brighter color, and then the top part is a darker color. However, they do also seem to sometimes add in some complementary colors within the eye at different locations. It really varies a lot by the eye. Sometimes they add an outer rim color to it. Sometimes they add a little white dot to the eyes. And sometimes the pupils themselves will kind of have like these spiky, it'll have like this spiky black line art around the edges. Not all the time, but it is also something that they do. So I think they really use a lot of freedom when it comes to rendering their eyes. And I think this is really where you have a lot of room to just kind of mess with a lot of different shapes. Okay, after you've done all of your analysis of an art style, then you really want to do at least 1 or 2 master copies. Master copies are basically just where you try to recreate the drawing one for one. So this is where you're really taking a really close look at what they're doing and figuring out how to implement it yourself. Personally, for me, I really like doing one master copy where I trace the line art, as I think this really helps me focus on just the line art at first and then really analyze what's different about their line art, any unique, interesting points about their line art that I might have missed in my initial analyzing stage. And then from there, I take off the line art, put it to the side, and then I try to color and render it based on what I'm seeing. And of course, all of the colors I do through color picking. If you also want to work on your color theory, this probably could be a good time to just kind of try to recreate the color just from the color wheel yourself instead of color picking. But personally, I just went with color picking. Alright, and in my second master copy, this is where I really just kind of focus on recreating it one for one without any sort of handicap where I'm copying the line art directly. So as you can see here, I wanted to do a face study since the face is something that I really like from the art style. So I did one where I mainly just focused on the face, and I worked to try to get the proportions correct. As you can see here, I got them a little bit off at the start. The face was too much to the side and the neck was also a little off. But this study is also where I really realized just how big their eyes are. Their eyes are very wide, but I think what threw me off was the fact that their eyes are also very long. I'm used to kind of drawing wide eyes, but not necessarily really long eyes. But they definitely give a ton of length to their eyes on top of giving it a lot of width, which I think is really what gives them the iconic really big eye style. Also, I think as you can see here, I think this copy isn't too bad, but I do think I made his face a little bit too small. I think his face is a little bit longer in the original, but overall I really like how it came out. And this is also where I realized that they did use blending modes at times. And as you can see here, they even used a blending mode on his face, but the part of the shadow that goes over the eye, I think they changed the color for that one area to blue instead of green. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Alright, so after doing a couple of master copies, now I want to try to recreate the art style just without doing a master copy through a unique pose and a unique character and all that stuff. So here I drew my OC Wisp. I draw them all the time. So whenever you do this, I recommend trying to do a comfort character that you draw a lot, just because that way you know exactly how they look. So you can really just focus on trying to replicate that look and replicate their style with that character. So as you can see here, this was like my first real attempt. I had actually done this before I did my second master copy, and because this didn't turn out exactly the way I kind of really wanted it to, that's actually why I went back and did a second master copy. So when it comes to his face, I actually think I did not bad on the eyes. I think they're a little bit small. I end up making them a little bit bigger. But also, I think his face shape, I think it's a little bit off. I think they tend to kind of like angle their faces a little bit more. And I think maybe I made his a little too rounded here. There's just something about it where the proportions, I think, seem a little bit off. I also made the mistake of adding a bunch of hatching through the line art on a rendered piece. When they do a rendered piece, they don't seem to really do this black and white like line art hatching. They really want to save that for like the manga pages, like black and white line arts. So I do end up going in the future and removing that. And I think it definitely does help a little bit. But like I said, their rendering style really relies on you having a good foundation in color theory, and I really don't. So it was very difficult for me to replicate the coloring, and I don't think I really necessarily got it perfectly outside of just maybe like the eye and like a little bit of the face. But I will say that I do really like how the ear came out in this one, as well as the eyes. Alright, and the final implementation is all about how to actually implement their art style and what you liked into your own art style. So here I really enjoy the way they draw their eyes, maybe not necessarily the shapes, so I kept my current eye shape, but I added in the pupils and the thicker eyelash, and I think it came out really well, especially the rendering. I think it gave them some really unique looking eyes. So this is something that I'll look into keeping for my future art style. It will take, of course, much more experimentation, but it is something that I enjoyed, so it's something that I'll keep in mind. I also really enjoy the way they render. It's super cool. Obviously, it's very hard for me to duplicate that rendering because I don't have a good grasp of color theory, but I do think the way his ears and his neck came out really nice. The rendering of his hair falls a little flat for me, but honestly, the rendering of hair always falls flat a little bit for me because I don't have, again, a good understanding of color theory, but also I don't really have a great understanding of hair. But I think once I increase my technical skill in these abilities, I definitely will revisit the way to render hair. Okay, and that's it. I hope you guys found this breakdown extremely useful and that you're able to then take this information into your own art style and recreate it yourself. This is the first episode in my art style guide series, so if there are any artists that you want me to do next, please let me know. At least for right now, my current plan of artists I want to do on my list is Blue Biscuits, Tamika, Tricky Wagon, Valinsky, Kuro. There are definitely more that I'm not remembering right now, but those are definitely the ones I plan on doing next on the list. I'm not sure how often I'll be posting these art videos. Normally, I just do kind of sketchbook videos or maybe character design. I want to talk more about my webcomic, which is where my OC is from. But that being said, I will try to get them out ideally every 2 weeks, I think. I would like to do them weekly, but obviously things like this take a lot of time, so I'm not 100% sure how reasonable it is to be able to always do this every week. But I'll try my best to try to do it every 1 to 2 weeks. So if there are any artists that you specifically want that I haven't mentioned yet, please let me know in the comments. Like the video if you found it useful, subscribe so you don't miss out on extra style guides in the future. And yeah, hopefully I'll see you next time. Okay, bye bye!